No one believed the alien Titan could be saved, least of all the very species that once worshipped it. But the humans, they were willing to fight for it. The towering figure of the alien Titan loomed in the distance, casting an enormous shadow across the barren landscape. Its once pristine armor, now tarnished and chipped from centuries of war, shimmered weakly in the harsh light of the dying sun. Its massive form, akin to an ancient god, was slowly crumbling, a broken monument to a civilization that had once ruled the stars. The planet, once lush and teeming with life, had long since fallen into decay. The Titan's people, the Zora, an ancient, spacefaring race, had vanished, leaving behind only whispers of their power and glory. And yet, the Titan remained, still functional in its mechanical heart, but abandoned and alone. The humans who had arrived on this world were not here to praise or admire. They weren't here to join the Zora's once proud empire. No, they were here on a mission to rescue the impossible, to save the last remnant of the Zora's greatest warrior, a being whose very existence could tilt the balance of power in the galaxy. But how do you save an alien Titan? The situation was absurd, almost laughable. A team of humans, barely a dozen strong, stood before the massive, half-sentient war machine, ready to fight to keep it alive. But what could they do against something that had been abandoned by its creators, left to slowly waste away in a dead world? The leader of the human team, Captain Mara Voss, was no stranger to difficult decisions. As a seasoned commander in the Human Federation, she had dealt with threats ranging from pirate factions to alien incursions, but this was different. She had fought wars to defend colonies, but now she was about to risk everything to keep alive a remnant of a species that had fallen long ago. "Are we sure about this?" Lieutenant Nate Kellers asked, his voice tinged with disbelief as he stared at the colossal, lifeless Titan. "I mean, look at it. It's practically a walking tomb." Mara turned to face him, her expression grim yet resolute. "It's not just a tomb, Nate. It's a weapon. And if we don't get it back online, it could turn the tide in the war." Kellers shook his head, skepticism written across his face. "You really think that this thing, abandoned for centuries, is going to be of any use to us? The Zora left it to die." "Exactly," Mara replied, her eyes narrowing as she assessed the massive machine in front of her. "And that's why it's our only shot. No one else will come. It's up to us. We don't have a choice." The crew of the human ship, the Invictus, had been stranded on the outskirts of the planet's orbit for days, having been sent to investigate the sudden reactivation of the ancient Zora technology. The discovery of the Titan had been a surprise, but what was more surprising was the fact that the machine still seemed functional, its enormous frame filled with energy that had once powered entire fleets. The question was, could they bring it back to life? The first task was a logistical nightmare. The Zora's technology was unlike anything the humans had ever encountered. The Titan, standing nearly 200 feet tall, was far beyond the reach of traditional human machinery. The planet's surface, once rich in resources, had turned barren, leaving nothing for the crew to work with but the scraps of an ancient civilization. The Invictus had limited resources, and the crew had to make do with what they could scrounge from their own ship and from the remnants of the planet's once glorious cities. "I've never seen anything like it," said Dr. Elise Tremont, the ship's chief engineer, as she scanned the data streams that flickered across her console. "This isn't just an ancient war machine. It's something more." "What do you mean?" Mara asked, stepping over to Elise's station. "Look at these readings," Elise continued. "The power systems are still active, albeit at minimal levels. But the real surprise, there's some kind of neural interface embedded in its structure, likely meant to be controlled by a Zora pilot. We're going to need to figure out how to interface with it." "We're good at figuring things out," Mara said with a grin. "Right. But what had seemed like a simple operation was turning into something far more complicated. The Titan wasn't just a machine. It was alive, in a way that humans had never anticipated. The team was about to discover that reactivating a weapon of such immense power wasn't going to be as easy as flipping a switch. As night fell, the team gathered around a campfire near the Titan's colossal feet. The wind howled across the planet's surface, carrying with it the whispers of an ancient past. It was a quiet evening, but the tension in the air was palpable. The crew knew they were on the brink of something that could change the course of their struggle against the alien warlords threatening the galaxy. "I don't know about the rest of you, but I'm getting a bad feeling about this," Kellers muttered, his face illuminated by the flickering flames. "We've been fighting for years, trying to get an edge over the warlords, and now we're pinning all our hopes on a broken Titan. Mara leaned forward, her gaze never leaving the Titan's massive form. "This isn't about hopes, Nate. This is about survival. We have no reinforcements. The Federation is spread thin. But if we can bring this thing online, we might just have the firepower to push back the warlords." "We don't even know if it'll work," Kellers countered, his voice rising with frustration. "No, we don't," Mara admitted. "But what other choice do we have? This is our shot." For a moment, there was silence. The weight of their mission hung heavy in the air. Each of them had come to this desolate world for different reasons, but now they were all united by one purpose: to keep the Titan alive. The next day, the real challenge began. The team had to face not just the mechanical and technological hurdles of reactivating the Titan, but the psychological weight of what they were trying to achieve. Mara and her team gathered around the Titan's interface, which had been uncovered in the last hours of daylight. It was a strange fusion of organic and mechanical, a neural network embedded directly into the Titan's chest. Dr. Tremont had already spent hours analyzing the data, trying to make sense of the interface's functions. It was clear that the Titan's Zora creators had designed it to be operated by a living pilot, and without a Zora to interface with it, the team was stuck. "We've tried everything," Dr. Tremont said, her voice tinged with exhaustion. "The Titan is not responding. It's like it's waiting for something." Mara stood behind her, looking at the massive machine. "What do you mean, waiting?" Dr. Tremont paused. "I mean that there's a neural link in the system, one that requires a living being. A consciousness. We can't just turn it on with switches and codes. We need someone to connect with it." Kellers stepped forward, his brow furrowed. "You want us to... what? Plug into it like it's some sort of neural network?" Dr. Tremont nodded. "Exactly. It's the only way to bring the Titan back online." The crew stood on the precipice, knowing that the only way forward would be dangerous, even life-threatening. One of them would have to interface directly with the Titan, risking their life and their mind in order to revive it. Mara stepped forward. "I'll do it," she said, her voice firm. "I'm the commander. I'll make the connection." The team exchanged uneasy glances. Kellers spoke up. "Mara, you don't know what you're getting into. This isn't some simple neural connection. We don't know what kind of damage it could do." Mara looked at him, her eyes resolute. "I'm the one who led this mission. And I'm the one who's going to see it through. If anyone's going to interface with the Titan, it's me." We've introduced the setting and characters, setting up the mission to revive the alien Titan. The crew, led by Captain Mara Voss, is tasked with reactivating an ancient weapon to help in the war against a galactic enemy. However, the task is far more complicated than they initially thought. The team is faced with technological and psychological challenges, and the stakes are high as they venture into the unknown, unaware of the dangers they will face. The Titan stood, silent and cold. No longer a monument to a forgotten empire, it was now their only hope. But as the crew worked tirelessly to bring it back online, the real danger began to emerge, not just from the machine, but from their enemies, who were watching from afar. The first few hours after Mara's decision were filled with frenzied activity. Dr. Elise Tremont worked tirelessly, attempting to connect their human-made technology to the Titan's ancient neural interface. The team knew that there was no turning back now. Mara had made her choice, and the consequences would be dire if the process failed. "Mara, are you sure about this?" Kellers asked for the third time, watching as Mara adjusted the neural link cables attached to the Titan's massive chest. "I'm sure, Nate." "We're out of time," Mara replied, her voice unwavering. She stood next to the enormous neural interface, which pulsed with a faint blue glow, almost like a heartbeat. The Titan's mechanisms were still running at a minimal level, but it was clear they would need a living mind to interface with it in order to activate the system. Elise approached with a tablet in hand, reviewing the scan of the neural network they had tried to connect to. "Captain, I'm telling you, this is dangerous. We're talking about a system designed for a Zora. Biologically, their nervous system is light years ahead of ours. This kind of interface, it could fry your brain." Mara met Elise's concerned gaze. "We don't have a choice. The warlords are closing in. If we don't get this Titan working, we're dead." Elise hesitated but nodded. "Just be careful." As Mara connected to the Titan's neural interface, the link was almost instantaneous. A rush of strange, overwhelming sensations flooded her mind. Shapes, lights, and flashes of forgotten memories. The Titan's consciousness wasn't empty. It was a fragmented, ancient mind, struggling to remember what it was. Mara closed her eyes, the cables now connected to the neural link, and took a deep breath. The moment she initiated the connection, the world around her seemed to vanish. It was like falling into a void, surrounded by chaos. A swirling mass of data, colors, and strange geometric shapes flooded her senses. At first, she couldn't understand anything, only flashes of thought, fragmented memories of a race long gone. The Titan's mind was like an ancient library, its shelves filled with forgotten information. She felt weightless, as though she was floating through the memories of the Zora, their people, their cities, their wars, and their eventual downfall. But there was something else beneath it all. A sense of urgency. A connection. An awakening. The Titan's mind was calling out, reaching for her, trying to merge with her own consciousness. She struggled to maintain control. "Mara, get out of there! You're slipping!" Kellers shouted from the other side, his voice distant but cutting through the disorienting sensations. But it was too late. The Titan's presence was overwhelming. Its consciousness was ancient and vast, and it sought to consume hers. Mara struggled to maintain her identity, to keep herself grounded. Suddenly, she was pulled back, and everything snapped into clarity. She was back in the camp, her body trembling as she disconnected from the interface. "Elise!" Mara gasped, trying to steady herself. "I saw it, so much. It was too much." Elise quickly moved to her side. "It's okay, Captain. You did it. The link is active. It's responding." But as they celebrated their success, something else was happening on the planet's horizon. Far beyond their camp, a fleet of warships had entered orbit. The warlords were coming. And now, the real battle would begin. On the edge of the planet's atmosphere, the enemy warships arrived. The Federation's enemies, the pirate clans of the Red Nebula, had been tracking the human team for weeks. They had already sabotaged the Invictus in orbit, leaving the humans stranded on this planet with no way to call for reinforcements. And now, they were preparing to launch a final assault, with the Titan's reactivation as their target. The fleet hovered in orbit, a menacing line of battle-hardened ships. These warlords were ruthless, and they knew exactly what the humans were trying to accomplish. They had no interest in the Titan's revival, they just wanted to make sure the humans didn't have it. "Captain, we've got incoming," Keller said, his voice grim as he monitored the enemy ships. "Their ships are already locking onto us. We have no defense." Mara's heart sank. The Titan was now alive, but they were not ready for the warlord's assault. They had to act fast, and the clock was ticking. "We don't have time to fix the ship," Mara said, her eyes scanning the data on the screen. "Elise, what's the Titan's status?" Elise, still reeling from Mara's connection to the Titan, stood beside the giant war machine. She wiped the sweat from her forehead. "The systems are active, but not fully integrated. The neural interface is working, but I can't say how long it will hold." Mara's thoughts raced. "Then we're going to have to make do with what we have. It's time to put the Titan to the test." As the enemy ships began their descent, the crew was faced with a terrible choice. Fight with the Titan they barely understood, or surrender and watch everything they had worked for crumble. The air grew heavy with the approaching threat. Mara paced, trying to process the enormity of their situation. If they didn't act quickly, the warlords would wipe them out before the Titan could even stand. Their only chance was to use the newly awakened machine to its full potential. "Mara, I need to know if this thing can fight," Keller said, looking at her as though he knew the answer before asking. "Can it move? Can it defend itself?" Mara glanced at the towering Titan. "I don't know yet. We've only just activated it. We need to see if it can operate in its current state." Elise stepped forward, her hands shaking but her voice steady. "We can try to wake it up fully. If we interface again, maybe we can stabilize the systems and get it functioning before the enemy arrives." "We don't have that long," Mara said, her voice firm. "We have to fight with what we've got. I'll interface again. Let's see if we can get the Titan's combat capabilities online." But as Mara connected with the Titan again, she quickly realized that the true battle wasn't just physical, it was a war for control. The warlords weren't just coming for the Titan. They were coming for her mind. Mara's mind plunged back into the neural link, but this time, something was different. The Titan's neural network had stabilized, But it was no longer just a passive observer. It was active, alive, and aware. The Titan's consciousness, once a dormant machine, was now asserting itself, trying to take control. Mara fought to keep herself grounded. "I can't let it consume me. I have to stay in control," she muttered to herself. But the Titan's mind was ancient, vast, and far beyond human comprehension. It wanted to command her, to merge with her. But Mara was stronger. She fought for her individuality, even as the Titan tried to drown her in its endless knowledge. The screens around her flickered, and Elisa's voice cut through the disorienting feedback. "Captain, we need you to wake it up. The enemy is almost here." Mara's heart pounded, and with one last surge of will, she pushed past the Titan's overwhelming presence. "Wake up," she commanded, both to herself and to the Titan. "Activate." The conflict intensifies as Mara successfully interfaces with the Titan, but the real battle begins when the warlords arrive in orbit, threatening everything the humans have worked for. The team must adapt to the new challenge of controlling the Titan, as Mara's struggle to maintain control over the Titan's vast and overwhelming consciousness takes center stage. The crew realizes that they must act quickly or risk losing everything. As the warlord ships descended, the alien Titan finally stirred, its systems coming online, its massive form awakening with a roar that shook the ground. But the battle for control had just begun. The humans now had to wrestle with the Titan's enormous power, and it was about to get even more chaotic. The sound of distant explosions echoed in the air, shaking the ground beneath the humans' feet. The enemy warships were close, their massive forms blackening the sky as they dropped down through the planet's atmosphere. Each ship was a hulking beast, bristling with weapons designed to obliterate anything in its path. The warlords didn't just want to win, they wanted to wipe out any trace of resistance. And this time, they were determined to destroy the last hope the humans had, the Titan. Mara stood in the control room, her hands still trembling after her connection to the Titan's neural system. The machine was alive now, but it was far from under their control. Her mind reeled from the intensity of the connection. The Titan's thoughts, its vast memories, and its history were still swirling in her head. She wasn't just commanding a war machine, she was now part of it, its consciousness intertwined with hers. But there was no time to think about that now. The warlords were approaching fast, and Mara needed to get the Titan fully operational, or they would all be doomed. "Elise, Nate, get to the control panels," Mara ordered, her voice steady despite the mounting pressure. "We need to get the Titan standing." "Standing? With the current systems?" Kellers looked at her incredulously. "Captain, we barely have the infrastructure to get it moving. We don't know what's inside that thing. We don't have a choice." Mara snapped, her gaze fixed on the giant Titan. She could feel the neural interface humming with power as the machine slowly stirred to life. "If we don't get it working now, they'll wipe us out before we have a chance to even fight back." Elise, the ship's chief engineer, was already working at the console, her fingers flying across the buttons. "I'm going to try to power up the central core. If I can get enough energy flowing, the Titan's combat systems might just boot up." The ground rumbled again, this time with greater intensity. The warlords were getting closer, and Mara could hear the sound of their weapons charging. The battle had already begun, but they were still on the defensive. She needed to move quickly, and she needed to do it with the Titan. The battle for control was about to get real. As the warlords descended upon the planet, the Titan finally stirred, its massive limbs slowly shifting into motion. But with every move, the Titan systems fought against the human control, a constant reminder that they were dealing with an ancient being far beyond their understanding. Mara climbed the small set of stairs to the interface console, where Dr. Tremont was now monitoring the neural connection. "We're losing time," Mara muttered as she connected once more to the Titan systems, her mind once again submerged in the machine's vast consciousness. "Captain, you need to focus," Dr. Tremont urged. "You're fighting both the warlords and the Titan. You have to take control before it's too late." Mara closed her eyes, trying to push past the overwhelming flood of information coming from the Titan. She could feel its memories, long dormant and full of power, rising up to meet her. But she wasn't sure she could keep control. The Titan's mind was ancient, and its processes were not designed to be controlled by a human. The longer she stayed connected, the more the Titan tried to assert itself. A sharp pain shot through her head as the Titan's consciousness surged against hers. She gritted her teeth and forced herself to push through. She couldn't lose control now. "Captain, you need to stabilize it." The warships are almost in range. Keller's voice crackled through the speakers, full of urgency. Mara's body trembled with the effort of staying linked, but she knew she had no choice. She had to stabilize the Titan. She was the only one who could do it. Just then, the Titan's massive legs shifted. The machine's enormous frame trembled as its systems came online one by one, fighting against the broken neural link that Mara had forced herself into. The Titan rose from the ground with a mighty groan, its immense form casting a shadow over the humans below. The warlords were moments away from their target, and the Titan was their only hope, if it could function, that is. Outside, the sky split open with a roar of incoming warships. The warlords' battle fleet hovered just above the horizon, and their weapon systems locked onto the human position. Mara knew this was their last stand. The Titan's head rose first, its sensors activating as the neural connection finally began to stabilize. Mara could feel it, the hum of energy coursing through the machine's vast systems, the power that had lain dormant for centuries, now awakening at her command. And yet, there was a sense of something more, something beyond her control. The Titan, once a mindless war machine, was now more than just a tool. It had a will. Mara felt the pressure building in her mind as the Titan's consciousness mixed with her own. But she couldn't let go. Not now. Do it now, she ordered, trying to maintain focus. The Titan's massive hands clenched into fists as if testing the power in its limbs. Dr. Tremont's voice came through the comms again. We're stabilizing the core, but it's still unstable. I can't guarantee how long it will hold together. If it doesn't respond in full combat mode, we're dead. I know, Mara said through gritted teeth. The warlords made their final move. The battle was about to erupt, and the humans had one shot, an untested, malfunctioning Titan against a fleet of merciless warships. The massive warships opened fire first, their energy cannons firing brilliant bursts of light. The Titan lurched, its armored body taking the brunt of the initial volley. Mara felt the impact reverberate through her bones as the Titan absorbed the blast. But it wasn't enough. The Titan wasn't fully operational yet. Elise, what's the status? Mara shouted. We're losing power, Captain. Elise called back, her voice tight with panic. The Titan's shields are still offline. It can't take another hit like that. Mara's eyes were locked on the screen as the warlord's ships powered up for another strike. She couldn't afford to wait any longer. The Titan was their only chance, and it wasn't ready. Without thinking, she acted on instinct. She gave the mental command, pushing herself deeper into the Titan's mind. Activate combat protocols. No. For a moment, nothing happened. The world around her was a blur of flashing lights, and she could feel the Titan systems fighting her. But then, slowly, the Titan's energy began to pulse, its body shifting, reorienting. The massive war machine's legs moved with a predatory grace, its enormous cannon charging. The first warship fired again, but this time, the Titan was ready. With a roar that shook the ground, it raised its massive arms and deflected the attack, sending the enemy's energy beam careening into the sky. We have control, Mara shouted, her heart racing. Deploying counterattacks. The first volley from the Titan's cannon tore through the enemy fleet, sending a warship into a tailspin. But the battle was far from over. The real fight was just beginning. The Titan's weapon systems roared to life, firing its powerful energy cannons into the warlord ships. The first ship exploded in a brilliant flash, the debris scattering across the sky like fireworks. But there were more ships, and they were coming in fast. Mara tightened her grip on the control panel, her mind still connected to the Titan. She could feel its power, its ancient might, coursing through her, and yet, there was something unsettling about the connection. It wasn't just a tool. It was alive, and she was tethered to it. We're taking down their shields. Kellers yelled, his voice full of excitement. They're retreating. But Mara knew better. The warlords wouldn't give up so easily. Their entire fleet was descending upon the Titan, weapons blazing. The battle was far from over. We fight now, Mara shouted. We take the fight to them. The Titan roared as its massive cannons fired again, cutting through the skies. The warlord's ships were scattered, but the battle was far from over. The tide of war had shifted, but the final victory would depend on their ability to adapt, on their ability to survive. The tension peaks as the Titan is fully activated and the battle with the warlord fleet begins. Mara and her team are forced to push the Titan to its limits, and the stakes are raised as they must fight for their survival. The section ends with the beginning of a major battle, and the humans are now in control of the Titan, just as the enemy intensifies their attack. The enemy had underestimated them. And now, with the Titan's full power unleashed, the battle for the planet, and for their survival, was in full force. But the greatest challenge wasn't the enemy fleet. It was the fragile bond between the humans and the ancient machine that now pulsed with life. The roar of the Titan's weapons echoed through the air, the shock waves rippling through the planet's surface as the battle raged on. The warlord's fleet, which had once seemed invincible, was now in disarray. Their ships were caught in the massive blasts from the Titan's energy cannons, their shields flickering as they tried to regroup. But Mara knew that this was far from over. They had gained a temporary advantage, but the warlords were relentless. They would keep coming. "Captain, we've disabled 2 of their ships," Kellers called over the comms, his voice full of excitement. "We've taken down their frontline defenses, but they're regrouping." "It's not over yet." Mara's mind was still connected to the Titan, her senses overwhelmed by the surge of power coursing through the machine. The Titan was alive now, its massive form moving with terrifying precision, but there was still a part of it, something ancient, something foreign, that fought against her. The neural connection wasn't perfect. There were glitches, cracks in the interface, and Mara could feel the Titan's mind pushing against hers, its will struggling to take control. "We need to finish this," Mara muttered to herself, her fingers dancing over the controls. "We can't let them regroup." The Titan's weapons roared again, and Mara watched as one of the remaining warlord ships faltered, its engine sputtering as it careened into the atmosphere. But as the ship descended in a fiery trail, the remaining fleet retaliated with a massive volley of missiles. The air around the Titan crackled with energy as the missiles closed in. "Mara, watch out!" Elise shouted from the control station. "They've launched a full strike. They're coming in fast." Mara's pulse quickened. The missiles were fast, too fast for the Titan's shields to fully absorb. She had seconds to act. "Activate emergency thrusters." Mara shouted. "Move it out of the way." "No." The Titan's immense frame shifted in response to her command, its thrusters igniting as it moved with surprising speed. The missiles impacted where it had been standing moments earlier, sending a massive explosion into the air. The shock wave rocked the ground beneath them, but the Titan was still standing, barely. "We can't keep dodging like this," Mara said through gritted teeth. "We need to take out their command ship." As the warlord's fleet gathered for another attack, Mara realized that the battle was no longer just about defeating their enemies. It was about controlling the Titan, controlling the very power they had unleashed. And that meant confronting the bond that was forming between her and the machine. As the warlord's ship circled, preparing for another assault, Mara fought against the overwhelming surge of data flooding her mind. The neural connection with the Titan was still active, but it was growing more unstable with every passing second. The machine was alive, in a way that the humans hadn't anticipated. It wasn't just a weapon, it was a consciousness, and that consciousness was at war with her own. "Captain, the Titan systems are unstable. The core is beginning to overload." Elise shouted, her voice tinged with panic. Mara's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean, unstable?" "We can't afford an overload right now. The power surges are too much," Elise said, her fingers flying over the console as she tried to stabilize the systems. "The neural link is overloading. If we don't disconnect soon, we risk complete system failure." Mara's mind raced. She couldn't afford to lose the Titan. It was their only chance to win. But if she stayed connected, she risked everything. She could feel the Titan's consciousness pressing in on her, its will trying to assert itself, trying to take over. "I'm not letting go," Mara said through clenched teeth. "I will finish this." The Titan's cannons roared again, and Mara directed the machine to fire at the remaining warlord ships. The power coursed through her, her mind fused with the Titan's, but every blast felt like it was tearing at her consciousness. The warlord ships exploded in a brilliant display of light as the Titan's weapons found their mark, but there were still more. "We need more power," Mara muttered, her mind barely holding on. "We need to finish their command ship." Elise was beside her, working feverishly to keep the systems running. "The Titan's combat core is running on maximum output, Mara. If you push it any further, we'll lose everything." Mara didn't respond. She couldn't. The only thing in her mind was the battle, the Titan, and the warlords. She pushed herself deeper into the link, her consciousness melding with the machines. The Titan's form shifted again, this time charging forward at an impossible speed. Its massive hands reached forward, seizing a nearby warship as though it were a toy. With a single, crushing motion, the Titan ripped the ship apart, sending debris spiraling into space. But the command ship, the warlord leader's flagship, was still untouched. Mara's vision blurred, but she could see it now. The command ship was heavily fortified, shielded by its own fleet. It was the key to victory. But the Titan's power was waning, and Mara could feel it. This might be their last chance. In that final, desperate moment, Mara realized what she had to do. She wasn't just fighting for her survival. She was fighting for the survival of every human, every world that depended on the Federation's strength. And to win, she would have to make the ultimate sacrifice. The Titan's power began to flicker. The neural link was unstable, and Mara could feel her own thoughts starting to fade. She knew that she couldn't hold on much longer. The Titan systems were running on borrowed time, and if she didn't act soon, she would lose both the machine and her life. But there was one thing she could do. "We can do this," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "We have to." Mara focused all her energy on the Titan, pouring everything she had left into the machine's core. She could feel her mind starting to fray, her vision blurring, but she knew that she had to push through. The command ship loomed in the distance, the heart of the warlord fleet. With a final, decisive command, Mara activated the Titan's ultimate weapon, a weapon that had been dormant for millennia. The ground shook as the Titan's cannon powered up, a beam of pure energy gathering at its core. "Mara, no!" Elise screamed as she watched the power levels spike dangerously. "You're going to overload the system." But Mara's focus never wavered. "This is it," she said quietly. "For humanity." With a final surge of energy, the Titan fired. The beam tore through the enemy fleet, cutting through the command ship's shields like they were paper. The massive warlord ship exploded in a brilliant flash of light, sending debris scattering into space. The battle was won. The warlords had been defeated. But Mara knew that the price had been high. She had given everything to the Titan, her body, her mind, and her will. The war was over, but the cost of victory was something she would carry for the rest of her life. As the dust settled and the warlord fleet was scattered, Mara disconnected from the Titan's neural link. Her body slumped forward, exhausted beyond measure, but the battle was over. The warlords had been defeated. The humans had won. But in the end, it had been the Titan's power, its ancient might, that had turned the tide. The crew gathered around her, relief and exhaustion written on their faces. Kellers helped her to her feet, his hand steady on her shoulder. "You did it, Captain," he said softly, his voice full of awe. Mara looked up at the remains of the warlord fleet, the debris still floating in space. "We did it," she whispered. But as she gazed at the Titan, now motionless, its massive form standing like a monument to their victory, Mara knew that the real cost of the battle was yet to be felt. The Titan's consciousness was still alive inside her mind, and she wasn't sure if she would ever be free of it. "We fought. We won," Mara said quietly, turning to face her crew. "But this isn't over. Not for me. Not for any of us." The final confrontation occurs as the Titan awakens and fights back against the warlord fleet. Mara makes the ultimate sacrifice, using the Titan's power to secure victory for humanity. The price of their success is heavy, and while they win the battle, the lasting effects of the war leave an emotional toll on the crew.